Excellencies, yes. Good afternoon. Can I ask everyone to be seated? Thank you so much. We know this is a very, very important day, but if we could ask everyone to be seated. That was fast. So, good afternoon to everyone, excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I'm so excited to welcome you today to this very important event and a unique event in the UN Secretariat. But before we go further with the program, we wanted to collectively ask you to have a moment of silence in honor of President George Bush, who served as the United States Permanent Representative to the UN in 1971, was also a special envoy of the Secretary General for the South Asia earthquake disaster in 2005, and ultimately, but most important for today, a great advocate for individuals with disabilities. So I invite everyone for a moment of silence. Thank you. Our continued commitment towards inclusion and equal employment opportunities is important to highlight as we celebrate the International Day of Persons with Disabilities. We continue to empower persons with disabilities and participate in inclusive, equitable, and sustainable development as part of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Creating an inclusive workplace is one of the Secretary General's and the organization's key priorities. As 15% of the world's population is disabled, we want the United Nations to reflect and represent the world we serve. The United Nations strives to be an employer of choice, as we believe in the abilities of all. Persons with disability as agents of change can advance the process towards inclusive and sustainable development and promote resilient societies for all. One of those advocates, and very well known, is our featured speaker today, Mr. Daryl Mitchell. As we adjust our environments and workplaces fit for persons of disability, we continuously build and expand from each other's experiences in making changes conducive to persons with disabilities. Our goal is to make an environment that is inclusive and supportive and where no one is left behind. Allow me to thank our very special guest. First, Mr. Roger DeRose, President and CEO of the Kessler Foundation. Next, Mixian Horn, Forbes Women Contributor. Mr. Jim Sinocci, Head of the Global Office of Disability Inclusion at JP Morgan Chase. Ms. Susan Robinson, Global Business Advisor and TDED resident. Ms. Christina Malone, Board of Director of Digital Marketing OpenStyle Lab. And finally, Mr. Daryl Mitchell, actor, NCIS, New Orleans, and Fear of the Walking Dead. Thank you to each one of you for joining us today in this event where we will uncover the art of the possible. And now I would like to introduce to you Ms. Ati Riasi, Chief Information and Communication Technology Officer.
Thank you very much, Martha. It's really a pleasure to see so many of you here. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests and speakers, I would like to welcome you today to the United Nations and to join us on this International Day of Persons with Disabilities. We are excited to be bringing in this fantastic panel and our featured speaker, Mr. Mitchell, to hear about the efforts underway in the private sector and to learn from their experiences, challenges, and successes, and to discuss the art of the possible. I'd like to join my dear colleague Martha in giving special thanks to the Kessler Foundation, especially my very dear friend Rick, where is he? Over there. For all their support in organizing this event and for their ongoing work with the United Nations to support inclusively and accessibility. There are over 1.5 billion people living with disabilities across the world today. And one of them, by the way, is my father, who's been living with a disability since he was about 30 years old. 80% of whom live in developing countries. In addition, the aging of societies has made disability even more prominent feature of life, with 1 out of 5 people experiencing disability at some point in their life. The UN's policies and activities, therefore, must address disability as an integral part of sustainable development rather than in a marginal issue of solidarity. The 2006 UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities is a milestone in improving the well-being of the world's largest minority, both as a human right and as a development instrument. However, more still needs to be done to respond to the needs and aspirations of persons with disabilities, both as agents and beneficiaries of sustainable development and as part of an inclusive UN global workforce. The Secretary General is very committed to supporting the inclusion of persons with disabilities and to accessibility across the major pillars of the organization and the UN system, and has undertaken the development of action plans and accessibility framework. In addition, the President of the 73rd session of the General Assembly, Her Excellency Ms. Maria Fernanda Espinosa, has launched a steering committee on accessibility, composed of the PGA, interested member states, senior representatives of the Secretariat, and representatives of civil society organizations. The steering committee will address the accessibility of the UN for persons with disabilities in a comprehensive manner by raising awareness, identifying current barriers to accessibility, and exploring plausible solutions with a systemized and integrated approach. In my role as the Chief Information Technology Officer, as part of Department of Management, we are prioritizing the use of technology to make the work and services of the United Nations more accessible both inside and out. Through a number of innovative solutions, we're making our UN websites more accessible to over 150 million yearly visitors to these sites. We're working to make all our public documents readable with assistive technologies, and we are exploring text-to-speech technology and artificial intelligence to improve our conferences and online events. As you will see in our joint exhibit, which is upstairs, and I hope I see many of you there, we're also working hand in hand with our Office of Human Resource Management to support all aspects of recruitment and an inclusive workplace. By using technology globally, we can accelerate innovation and change towards improving the lives of so many people around the world and a UN that is inclusive to all. Now, I'm pleased to welcome Ambassador Kelly Currie, representative of the United States of America on the Economic and Social Council of the United Nations, and alternate representative of the United States of America to the sessions of the General Assembly of the United Nations. Ambassador Currie specializes in political reform, development and human rights, and humanitarian assistance. She has held senior policy positions with several international and non-governmental human rights and humanitarian organizations, and has long been an advocate of persons with disabilities. Join me in welcoming Ambassador Currie.
Thank you, Assistant Secretary General Riazi, and thank for that kind introduction. Let me begin by acknowledging Ati and Martha and thanking them for the work that they are doing every day to make the UN more accessible. I'd also like to acknowledge Roger DeRose from the Kessler Foundation, Jan Beagle, who I believe is supposed to be here but hasn't quite made it yet, and Daryl Mitchell, who I had the pleasure of meeting today, Natalie. Amazing. Watching you walk out with that exoskeleton just gave me chills, and seeing what we're doing with technology to improve the lives of people with disabilities is just incredible. Thank you for being here. And to Sean, who will be emceeing today, thank you. And I had the wonderful pleasure of meeting Tanner Gears, a Paralympian who's here from the United States, and just all the other distinguished speakers and all of you who've come here today. We're so happy to have you here at UN headquarters. As the representative of the host country of the United Nations headquarters in New York, it's my pleasure to stand here and represent the U.S. mission to the UN on this important day, recognizing the human rights of persons with disabilities. I spend a lot of time in this room. This is where we do our third committee work, which is the human rights component of the General Assembly here in New York, and also humanitarian work. And it's wonderful to see it filled with advocates and persons with disabilities and all of you who care so much about this issue today. So I'm so thrilled to welcome you here. We spend a lot of time in here talking about what the United States is doing to promote human rights around the world. And so today is very special for me because I see the United States as such a great champion of the human rights of persons with disabilities here at home and abroad. Our federal legislation and actually the legislation and efforts undertaken by governments at all levels in the United States are world leading, and we're really proud of what we're doing here in this country. So I'm honored to be representing us. And even the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities was directly influenced by legislation that was created in the United States, and our laws have served as a model for national laws around the world. And this year, we're marking the 50th anniversary of one of those critical pieces of legislation, the 1968 Architectural Barriers Act, which has a very prosaic and kind of boring and not very interesting sounding name, but it actually paved the way for what is our seminal piece of legislation, the Americans with Disabilities Act. And Rick Kessler reminded me this afternoon, that that piece of legislation would not have been possible were it not for the gentleman that we honored with a moment of silence this morning, George Herbert Walker Bush, who signed that into law and made that legislation and was a great advocate for its full implementation in the United States. And so I think it is quite poignant that we honored him today and that we recall his memory and both his leadership as the permanent representative of the United States here at the UN, as well as his leadership on this issue. And I think as I saw this morning the picture that I guess has gone around the world of his guide dog, Sully, lying in front of his casket. And it was a very poignant thing that I think has touched a lot of people's hearts today. And so I think that it does remind us all that, you know, we can all use a little help. And I think it's such a great day to be able to talk about these issues. Today, U.S. law requires that nearly every building in our country be accessible to people with disabilities. And this is a huge, I think it's a good tribute to President Bush that that's the case. Unfortunately, here at the UN, as many of you may have realized coming in, this building still struggles with this issue. And accessibility is the goal, and we know it's one that we all share. And we really want to encourage the UN to keep working on making UN headquarters accessible to all of us. We owe it to the UN staff, we owe it to the delegations who come here and work every day, and to the countless members of the public who would like to come in and experience this important building and learn about it and the work that goes on here every day, all year round. And this need not be, as we found out in the United States, it need not be inconsistent with historic preservation to make this building fully accessible. And so we really want to keep encouraging the UN to keep working on this. And I've seen this with my own staff that struggles to access this building, the individuals on my staff that have disabilities and struggle to work here. And it's very much sensitized me to the real challenges that we face. So while as much as we appreciate the wonderful efforts that are being undertaken to help make the UN more accessible to everyone, we really want to keep pushing for a more systemic effort and really push for greater accessibility. And we look forward to working with the PGA's efforts on this and joining her in that. So with that, I just want to wish you all a great conference today, and hope that this is a great day for all of us. And thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak. And we're just thrilled to see all of the different events that are going on today to celebrate this important occasion. So thank you very much.
Hello, can you hear me? Okay, yay. First of all, I want to say what a beautiful room we're in. I love that I can see all of your faces. I want to acknowledge also the people that are joining us via live stream today. And it's just great to be a part of the UN family, even for the day. So thank you so much to Ambassador Kelly Curry and to Undersecretary General Beagle, who will be here, and UN Assistant Secretary Generals Lopez and Riazi, User First, and the Kessler Foundation. That exoskeleton is something else, let me tell you. And especially to Grace Junn and Open Style Lab, without whom I wouldn't be here. I'm really excited also that I got to meet Daryl Chill Mitchell today. Yeah, I'm good. Actually, I'm going home now. And also, of course, beloved Christina Milan, and so many other amazing advocates here today. Thank you, Excellencies, and this fine audience. I'm just so impressed. These are men and women not just speaking with passion or ideals, but people of action who are aware of their ability to create opportunity not only for themselves, but others. I was really inspired by our program title today, The Art of the Possible. So I want to expand on this idea of possibility as an art. My parents, just to give you a little background, My parents taught me that anything is possible, and because of that, great schools and the liberties afforded to me by the Americans with Disabilities Act, I grew up truly believing that my disability was merely a blessing that added to my life. I cut the lines everywhere I went, and people never forgot me. My parents, as artists, prized uniqueness, and they celebrated it in me. Even worse, I was an only child. Still, it took me years to do anything I dreamt about, and to realize that others didn't have the same support. And that's when I knew I wanted to be the love and support that others may not have had. I started to speak up. I started to participate. I joined this family of advocates. Possibility as an art is about action, not just in one area, but all: employment, family, education, fashion, technology, and representation. It's also about collaboration and allies like you, who create opportunities and break barriers with us. The goal is not simply inclusion. Inclusion is not enough, but active participation and even celebration. It's about moving and rolling forward to fulfill a need, or many. As exemplar for AT&T's Connectability Challenge, I got to communicate with developers as they were making apps and tech solutions for people with disabilities. When I was designed for at Parsons with Open Style Lab, I got to voice my needs. Okay. I got to voice my needs. Let's see. Where'd I go? Okay. Okay, I think. Okay. Well, I got to share with people. Okay. Yes. But there's still something missing. All right, that's okay. I got to voice my needs, and I got to be a part of that artistic process. And for me, being part of that artistic process, it draws us closer to the divine. You know, for me, it's also about not being afraid to try, right? To put ourselves out there. You know, when I was a kid and my mother said, that I should, take time to do arts and crafts, I would draw, and then let's say I drew a sixth finger on the princess's hand. I'd want to crumple up the whole paper and start over again. And she'd say, no, make your mistakes into art. And possibility as an art is about taking those steps that we might be afraid to take at times. So what if we're deliberate in creating possibilities and generous with opportunities and conversations with people called different or strangers? Changing the global conversation on what's possible for people with disabilities doesn't just happen on a billboard or on a TV screen or even here at the UN. It starts between a parent and a child and their teacher, an employer and their employee, between people of different backgrounds. It requires openness, mutual respect, and shared vision, because we never fully know what we can do or become until we're given the opportunity to grow there. For those of us here who have been blessed to be leaders and advocates, we know that it takes faith in ourselves and the faith of others to get the job done. Most of us don't fully know what we're capable of until we do it anyway. I never thought I would write for Forbes or teach or speak. I just knew something needed to change. I ask each of us here not to just listen or consume the valuable content shared with us today, but to commit to making our own strokes, however small, whether as an ally or as a person with a disability, not waiting on someone else to make the change for us or fulfill our needs. To start small and know that we don't have to do this alone. Look at this room. Each one of us is a member of the same choir with a voice to give to our collective song. Each of us has a paintbrush. The world and everything we create is our collective canvas. And as we hear from these luminaries we're about to hear from, who make things possible with their example, action, opportunity, and innovation, I ask that you think about the actions we take today to add color and beauty to the world. what part in this song do we wish to play to be a part of the solution? And please tell us, how best can we sing together? Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, and now I have the pleasure of introducing our fabulous panel. Of course, Roger DeRose to my left. Hold on 1 second. I want to make sure wait, I'm missing pages. This is funny. Okay, here we go. I've got it, yes. So, we have Mr. Roger DeRose, President and CEO of the Kessler Foundation. Thank you. We have Ms. Susan Robinson, Global Business Advisor and TED resident. We have Ms. Christina Milan, Board of Directors, Digital Marketing, Open Style Lab. And last but not least, Mr. Jim Sinocci of JP Morgan & Chase in the Office of Disability and Inclusion. Thank you. Okay. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Roger DeRose, and thank you so much for inviting us to be here today. I'm joined by many of my Kessler Foundation colleagues today that are in key leadership positions throughout the organization, in addition to several of our trustees, our board members. In addition, you heard Marta talk about Rick Kessler and his family that are here today. Rick is a retired board member, but he's also the grandson of Dr. Henry Kessler, who started the hospital, Kessler Institute, in 1948, and was really the pioneer, really the founder of what we know today as modern-day medical rehabilitation. So we live in his shadow and his footstep, and he was keen not only in terms of caring for patients, and he wrote a book called The Knife Is Not Enough, because he really believed that as an orthopedic surgeon, that surgery was not enough to get an individual reintegrated with their family, with the community, with the workplace. So he believed in treating the entire individual. We at Kessler Foundation, we're an organization that does leading research in the field of rehabilitation. We call it translational research because we're very keen on getting it into bedside care. And we start at Kessler Institute, and then we roll it out around the world, if not the select medical hospitals that are nearly 30 in the United States now. You saw one application with Nancy Barrett here today. Nancy was in an exoskeleton. That is one exoskeleton that we use almost every day. We're testing 5 different types of exoskeletons, from hard exoskeletons that Nancy is in today to soft robotics as well. Not only for the lower limbs, but we're also working in upper extremities as well. And we work in brain and spinal cord injury and stroke and multiple sclerosis and other neuromuscular conditions. The other very critical part of our organization is the employment initiatives that come from our grant-making opportunities that we invest in around the country. And it started out as pilots in the Northeast, and then about 8 years ago, we started to roll those initiatives out nationwide. And so many organizations have benefited from the investments that we have made in terms of employment initiatives. So we're delighted to be here as part of the Art of the Possible in terms of talking about how not only technology fits in. I happen to believe that disabilities is the driver of innovation. And when you think of Google Glass, you think of Google Talk, you think of Google Car, these are all built with disabilities in mind, but they benefit the entire population. And so when you think disabilities, think what it can bring to the country, to the population as a whole. I'm a regular user of closed captioning at 3 a.m. in the morning when I don't want to wake up my wife. And many others I saw today as we were walking here, how many individuals are users of the curb cutouts here in New York. So not people with disabilities, but people with abilities as well. And one of the things that I'd like to know is how we put a man on the moon and brought individuals from the moon back before we decided that putting wheels on luggage was a good idea. And as I was in the airport yesterday, everyone who seemed to be using wheelable luggage, people able-bodied as well as people that suffered some type of a mobility issue. So I'm delighted to share the panel with Susan, Christina, and Jim and Sean. And so we're going to ask some questions of these individuals that not only live with a disability, but also have broken out of what many would say are barriers to disabilities. I'm getting a signal that in order to hear us, I understand that these would be very useful, and I understand you just click this over your ear and you'll be able to hear better in terms of some of the things that are taking place up here. So I'm going to start by asking Jim to just talk a little bit about your background. Jim, you were an executive at IBM, and then you retired, and then you came out of retirement to join J.P. Morgan. Can you talk a little bit about why right now is the right time to start employing people with disabilities, Jim?
Sure. Well, part of that story of why I came out of retirement is a backstory. And when I was interviewing for the job at Chase, I had to do 17 interviews to get the job, and I thought something was wrong with me because they usually do 5 or 6 interviews. And they told me that it was a global job and something that they wanted to, make work specifically in this space. So the question was, why did they want to do it? And the firm said, and this is why I was impressed with the firm, they were able to do a great job with GLBT, Black, Hispanic, promoting all of our constituency groups, and they just wanted to do it better for people with disabilities, which is a daunting challenge. The other part of that is my wife and I just moved from New York to Massachusetts when I retired. I was only out of retirement for 6 months, and then went through the interviews, et cetera, and I turned to my wife and I said, do we want to really go back to New York? Because I've been married for 30 years, November, and, she's just my right arm in my life. And she says, if you go back, you can help a lot of people. And so we came back. And I've been there 2.5 years. And as we go on with this, I'll tell you some more about the results. But I came back to commit to helping people with disabilities because the time is right. We have the technology. We have the medical technology. And what we're lacking is the right attitude to just do this. And we'll talk a little bit more in a minute.
That'll be great. Thank you, Jim. Appreciate it. Christina, you're with Open Style Labs, and can you talk a bit about how you became associated with them?
Yes, I can. So about 8 years ago, I woke up one morning and couldn't use one of my fingers. And then throughout the last 8 years, I've lost the ability to use my arms and my fingers. So when I was starting a new job, I realized, how am I going to dress myself? I live alone. I can't use my arms. Everything I've been able to hack, because, we're the original hackers, people with disabilities, I couldn't create a coat. And I was chatting with someone, and they said, well, you really should check out Open Style Lab. And then from there, I kind of fell in love with Open Style Lab, became a board member, and now I spent really all my free time making sure that people understand, the intersection of disability and fashion.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. So we're going to come back to that as well and talk about fashion and disability, design for disability, and how that also helps able-bodied individuals as well, Christina. Susan, I listened to your TED Talk the other day. I know you have about 1.5 million views, and I wonder if you can share with the UN audience today. You discuss in your TED Talk how much you hate the word disabled because, I'll use your quote, it detonates a mindset of less than, and it disregards capacity, ability, and potential. Can you address that for our group today?
Sure. First, I'll like to address my critics who have concerns when I say this kind of statement. There is policy that makes the world accessible, And I not only believe in that policy, but I benefit from that policy on a day-to-day basis. But the word disabled, when it's used to describe people, has some unintended consequences. So I think about the word itself, disabled, and in the English language, it's used to mean many different things. It's mean to make something that works deliberately not work, like a disabled alarm. It means, back in the spring, there was a professional New York baseball player who sprained his middle finger and was put on the disabled list. I think that's very task specific, and I do acknowledge that in New York, the middle finger is a critical communication tool. However, does it really meet the criteria of disabled? I'm definitely specific to industry, yes. In the bigger picture, I'm not so sure. Disabled also is used to describe a car that's broken down at the side of the highway and not capable of functioning for what it's been designed to do. So when that word is used to describe me, I just get a little sassy attitude about it because I really don't know what somebody means by that, particularly when it's a broad spectrum of people that the word covers, including individuals who need 24-hour care in order to accomplish activities of daily living, and 50% of the workforce, which in the U.S. is covered by the Americans with Disabilities Act. So what really are we talking about? And oftentimes, it's really by tone and tenor and how people treat me. So some folks who really go super conservative will infantize me. Some folks who really don't quite get it when I say I have a vision impairment, could you help me out reading X, Y, or Z? They will yell at me, and I remind them that vision and hearing are different. And sometimes it's just a reminder that I need a little extra help, but I get to define that help. It's not help that gets to be imposed on me. So when the word disabled is used to describe people, because there's a complexity of language that exists, I just, as I said, get a little sassy attitude about it.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Susan. So, so Jim, I know that we had you as a guest to come to Kessler Foundation and tour our organization, and we had a chance to spend a lot of time talking about individuals with disabilities. What are the major obstacles facing people with disabilities when it comes to employment from your experience, whether that's human rights or transportation or attitudinal barriers, Jim?
I think the short answer is, and probably the most surprising one, is attitude. It's and we just heard Susan talk about this a little bit. Part of my job at Chase worldwide is to get managers comfortable hiring people with disabilities.
Right.
And that's all about attitude. And once we get through that, everything sings. So, we have an accommodations team that delivers accommodations in the United States and will around the world next year. We have an accommodations budget that takes away the thought of a manager hiring a person with a disability saying, well, I can't afford a ramp, an automatic door. I said, no problem. We handle it at the top. So we take away the reasons for not hiring a person with disability. And one of the things we just talked about is in the old Nike ad, just do it. Meaning, go out and hire people, bring them in, and all costs associated with people with disabilities should be held at the top, where you don't give someone else an excuse not to hire because you can't afford to do a certain thing. And that's what I love about the mindset of the firm. They agreed to all this. And today we announced an international standard or policy letter for people with disabilities that basically is for managers around the world at the firm, not employees, but it tells managers you can go hire a qualified person to work here. So when we work on an environment, we build an environment that says, there's no reason why you can't hire a qualified person with a disability. And that gets to this attitude about this thing. And the net of this is that, let's be honest, when able-bodied people see a person with a disability, they think an alien just landed on the planet, right? They don't know what to say. They don't know what to do. They're afraid they're going to catch something from that person with a disability. And what I try to do is normalize us to the point where people are kind of more comfortable talking with people with disabilities. It's just like I could ask everybody in the room, how many of you have nieces or nephews or children? Raise your hands. So, and that means everyone in the room should raise, or you know someone that's a child. What happens when that child turns 14 or 15? They turn into aliens, right? They go nuts. And then by the time they're 21 years old, they turn around to mom and dad and say, you know, you guys are pretty cool, you're pretty smart. And the answer to that is, no, you just came out of the alien stage, right? So it's this attitudinal part where people don't know what to say. They're afraid about being politically incorrect. They don't want to say the wrong thing. And some of the questions I get when I do talks like this is, well, Jim, what do I say when I meet a person with a disability? I say, how about hello? How about, would you like a cup of coffee? Can I help you to your table? But they need permission. Able-bodied people need permission because they don't want to make mistakes. Once you get through that, I believe the art of the possible comes in. You could hire them. You could promote them. They can become executives. They can have a career track. And things work out. And it's worked out like that at the firm.
So, Jim, before we leave that, at J.P. Morgan, I know when you were with IBM was always on the leading edge in terms of building and designing products that would meet the needs of your marketplace, including people with disabilities. At J.P. Morgan, do you find that the senior leadership is supportive of this initiative from Jamie on Diamond on down? Or do you find that there's a gap between there and the supervisory level that has to do the hiring?
Well, part of my onboarding was meeting Jamie Dimon and all his leadership team. Mm-hmm. And the reason for doing that was, and I met everyone on Jamie's team, was to let them know that I'd be working globally. Right. And I may end up in their patch someday, and they say, who is this guy doing this work? So it started off the right way. Right. I think what I've seen at the firm is the leadership understands this, and I think the employees understand it, mm-hmm. but it's middle management that's so daunted with work and moving the bar for the business that I have to get their attention to pay attention to disability inclusion, because they've got 20 million things on their plate. Yeah. So how do we insert one more thing and make their life bearable? And by setting up the structure that we did, from accommodations to recruiting, to having the budget held at the top, makes their jobs easier. Mm-hmm. And so that's how you have to work that program.
Sure. You know, we found in a study, Jim, that we did back in 2017 that supervisors were excellent in terms of carrying out the mission of hiring people with disabilities, but they felt a real disconnect if senior management was not supportive of that initiative. And it was the individuals at that supervisory managerial level that really wanted to bring change to the organization but weren't getting the support from the top. In your case, you seem to be getting support from the very top.
Look, you know, all cards up. That was my strategy from the beginning.
Right.
I spent 39 years at IBM trying to figure out how to do it right, how to do it better. Right. And the 21st century is the time to do that, because we have technology, we have a greater acceptance of this area, but we have to empower people to do it. Like at the UN, you know, I would say that if the UN wants to hire more people with disabilities, you set a strategic plan up and do the training, set up the attitudinal programs in terms of informing people that it's okay, you know, to hire people with disability, here's why, and train them. It's all we need is the will, the will to do it. Look, I'm totally paralyzed. I can't strong arm anybody to do anything, but the whole firm is doing this worldwide.
Right.
I mean, look, I'll give you numbers. Like
right.
Last year we hired about 15 to 1,700 people with disabilities. Huge number. This year,
that's a big number.
This year, we're up to about 700. Mm-hmm. And so, those are good starting numbers, but we're hiring people from all walks of life, but they're qualified. The point is, we've got to get out that we're feeling sorry for people with disabilities.
Right.
We're not. We're hiring qualified people who could do the work.
Right. Very important point that, in corporate America, it's not seen as a charity. It's seen as a business opportunity to address this huge and growing market, because as baby boomers age, there's no doubt that I always tell folks that as you age, you better have a great acute care hospital, and if you live long enough, a great medical rehabilitation hospital, because at some point, you're going to need it. There'll be some
absolutely.
point when you will need it, right? Let's move on to Christina. Christina, at Open Labs, describe for the audience the process of designing clothing to be inclusive, and how do you determine where the greatest needs are in the disability community?
Definitely. So when it comes to designing for, I would say, a universal group, we've decided to focus just on physical disabilities when it comes to not being able to put your clothes on or open your pants or being able to tie your shoes. So we looked at the numbers, and it was physical disabilities and ease of use where we should focus, because as the government, you focus on where the greatest need lies. And that's how we've kind of decided where we put our efforts into. And then when it comes to how we actually design for an inclusive world, we design with and for people with disabilities. The biggest motto in the disability world is nothing for us without us. And that's why we make sure our teams have someone with a disability on it. We also have multifunctional teams. We have physical therapists, occupational therapists, we have fashion designers, we have coders. So having this multifunctional team, we're able to create really innovative designs, and with people with disabilities be the original hackers. I mean, we've made things from inflatable clothing to we've created a jacket that you can put on without the use of your arms, like my jacket.
So Christina, describe when guests here today go upstairs to see the Open Labs booth and demonstration, what will they see?
So right now we'll be showing a lot of the innovative fabrics. Right now we're showing a lot of material sciences through 3D printing. The great thing that we're able to have is a 3D printer, and that way we're able to make customized clothing, because everybody's body is different. So you'll be able to see that. You'll be able to see an amazing design. I type with my feet. So my partner Grace, who's right over there, she created socks that have conductive thread, so that when I whip out my feet, not everybody is like looking at me like I have 5 heads, and it allows me to text. And that's the difference between me having a job and not having a job, is I'm able to go to the boardroom and take notes with my feet having these socks. So that's a huge difference in unemployment, and I think that's why fashion is so important when it comes to the unemployment rate with people with disabilities.
Christina, describe for the audience how you go through a metro machine.
Yes. So, New York has its challenges. It's not accessible. And we've created this amazing necklace where we drop the MetroCard into the MetroCard reader, and I use my neck muscles to swipe the card. I was climbing over the metro, and I'm wearing a dress as a woman. It wasn't the best sight to see. And so I had to figure out something. And with the team at Open Style Lab, we were able to create this necklace. And from there, I'm able to get to work. So that allows me not to have to depend on the government and being able to depend on myself. And then also having a job gives me some purpose. During the day, I work at a company called Possible, and it's an advertising agency, and I run inclusive design. And for me to be able to get to meetings, I needed to be able to take the subway, because taxis at 5 p.m. in New York just are not they're not reliable. So having these things, allows me to function and then have a job which gives me hope and a passion in life.
Terrific. And another great use of technology as well, right, Christina? Right. So, thank you, Christina. Susan, you work with executives in a variety of different industries. Mm-hmm. I saw that from your website. How is your vision and your ideas an asset to those executives in those organizations? Can you talk about that?
Sure. So in my consulting practice, actually I should back up to say that when I entered Penn State as a freshman, I entered as a biology major with the intention on being an orthopedic surgeon. Halfway through college, I was diagnosed with the genetic vision impairment that I have. I am legally blind, and I still argue that I could be an orthopedic surgeon. It's just that no one will give me malpractice insurance, and that is a real practical barrier. So I sat as a 19-year-old, I sat in a retina specialist office and thought to myself, well, if I can't operate in a hospital, I'll just operate the entire hospital, and change my major to health policy and administration, and have had this really interesting career, just like anyone else who would have a very interesting career. And so my vision impairment was kind of like a side note. It was just like Susan doesn't see very well kind of thing. So if a bill came to the table and I was the most senior person at the table, I'd be responsible for paying it. Someone else would calculate the tax and tip, put a nice big dark X by the space, and I could sign it as if I were 20/20 sighted. So my work as an organizational leader, as a department head, as someone who's gone through a lot of different experiences, organizational turnaround, disaster response, building new programs, closing up programs that needed to be closed up, it's a really interesting career to be able to take cross-industry to folks who don't necessarily have that experience. But what I often find is that the first question I normally get is, wow, how do you do that and you're vision impaired? So it's always interesting to me that it seems that I am always accused of infiltrating the fully sighted world successfully. And so once we get past what I can see and what I can't see, I see the world like an impressionist painting. So I have mistaken an Asian man for my mother, and I use low vision aids. It is true. I didn't hug him, though, thank goodness. And I did say something really inappropriate in a men's bathroom once, but we'll just leave that for another day. And I use vision aids to help me see, but the lack of 20/20 vision doesn't mean that I'm not skilled at other things. And that's really the interesting rub to me, where when we talk about people with disabilities, the opposite then becomes people with abilities. But all people have abilities. All people have strengths, and as a person who has hired and unfortunately fired folks, not everyone has it all, and even the so-called normal doesn't have every skill honed to a perfect point for every activity or situation of every day of their lives. So my question starts to become, why is my not 20/20 vision such a problem? So in working with executives, it's really figuring out what is the nature of this problem, where are you going, and how do we get there, and what are the resources that we can put to it. What's interesting about my vision, which I think is really complementary to what a lot of executives do, is 20/20 sighted folks, in my experience, see what they see because they know the totality of what they see is the totality of what exists. For me, I know that the totality of what exists is not what I see. So I can create pathways to what I think is there based on previous experience and just sort of be always in diagnostic assessment mode, pulling in as much information and detail as I can to make sense of what's going on around me. But it allows me to stay very open to possibilities that other folks can't see because they're very rooted in what is existing within the boundary of what they see or do or experience. And I'm constantly in the mode of, what is that and where can we go and how can we do it? And that ability to create space in that way is something that when people are trying to create vision in the business kind of way and implement and execute that kind of vision successfully, it's really a great asset to have. The other thing that's really interesting as a person who walks into a room in a business environment and says, I can't do something, it's very unusual. I was even taught going in, when you go into an interview and somebody asks you about your weakness, you turn it into a strength. But there are certain things that I just can't do, and quite frankly, that really applies to everyone. And so it creates a little bit of space with folks, with my clients that I work with, when they say, you know what, I really can't do this all that well either. They say it very in hushed tones, but that's okay. To create a safe space where folks can identify what are all of the pieces, all of the talents that we need, what are the talents that we have and the things that we need to build on. It's really one of those terrific things. And to Jim's point, that mindset piece is really important, because when a so-called normal person assumes that someone who is not quote-unquote so-called normal doesn't bring anything to the table, we're really cutting all of ourselves off from what is the art of the possible, because we are uniquely experienced and we are naturally skilled and we are well deserved of all the opportunities that we have based on our strengths, in the same way that everyone is well deserved of the opportunities based on their strengths too.
That's great, Susan. Susan, before you leave that, topic, when you think of the industries that you deal with, who's most open to the inclusiveness of people with disabilities into their program, into their markets, into the design of products and services? What do you find in terms of industry specifics?
So I tell the following story, and it kind of gets everyone on board. in the blind space, and I know this space a little bit well, as do many of you in this room, it can be a challenge to get the mindset shift that Jim was talking about, because generally the first question is, can a blind person use a computer? And as we all know, those of us who are just sort of agreeing, that just because the so-called normal person doesn't know how to turn on the voice accessibility on their phone doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And it doesn't mean that it's not available to us and that we actually know it. So there is a piece of information that we know that the so-called normal doesn't. However, what ends up happening is that if someone who is blind goes into a job and for whatever reason it doesn't work out, and in the so-called normal world, things don't work out for lots of different reasons, typically, before Jim, that business would say, they wouldn't necessarily say it, but it would sort of be like, well, we're not going to do that again. Conversely, if a job doesn't work out with, say, a 6-foot-tall guy, the business isn't saying from now on 5'11" and down, 6'1" and up, no more 6 foot even. It didn't work out. So it's an arbitrary criteria. So once we can get to Jim's point, that mind shift of it's not us and them, it's not disabled and abled. It is if you are looking to build a team of success. In my world, I already noted I went to Penn State, so kind of a big football fan. In the football world, no one ever says to a wide receiver, you know, you're not big enough and wide enough to be a center. And no one ever says to the center, you're not quick enough with great hands to be a wide receiver, so you can't be on our team. They really think about the totality of what is needed in order to be successful in whatever the task or larger vision is, and they build towards that vision with all of the different components and all of the different positions. And I think if we shift business towards that thinking where it's asset-based, not assumed deficit-based, we'd be in a lot better spot. And so when I get to have this conversation one-on-one with clients, it sort of doesn't matter what industry they're in. They're like, oh, yeah, we never thought about it that way. Right. And so it's just that mindset shift that is exactly what Jim teed up. Yeah,
very interesting. Thank you, Susan. Jim, you mentioned that now is an ideal time ideal time in our history to be hiring people with disabilities. And you mentioned that you've hired just last year 1,500 to 1,700 employees. Can you talk a bit about the types of areas that they're involved in the organization?
Probably all areas. I don't see them all. I have a recruiting team, and my staff helps interface with recruiting. So I kind of manage it in terms of, so I have a small team, but I have about 35 people working for me in the business. Real estate, legal, employee relations, technology is big. We have an accessibility team. So all these teams have been built in the last 2.5 years. And so we're leveraging all the levers, but my job is to encourage and to, how should I say it, enable those organizations to do the work they do. So it becomes very easy in terms of my job. I am not on the ground with other, one of my team members, Dina Grillo's here, and she works with recruiting. So I go through her and the rest of the recruiting team to get this stuff done. But I'm also at the center of everything inclusion with disability at the firm worldwide. Mm-hmm. So, but again, this is a business that has adopted this space as one of its lines of businesses. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I think it's working very, very well that way. But Jim, I'm also afforded the opportunity to help change some of the paradigms in the marketplace. So for example, our government programs people enable me to go to Washington and speak to Congress and members of the Senate. And I'm trying to get them to rethink, for example, the fact that people are on disability benefits. Right. And my big point is, let's change the paradigm in the 21st century. Mm-hmm. Let them work and keep their benefits. Right? Because here's the argument. If they come off benefits and they get a job, most people who are disabled will end up, right, there's large, medium, and small businesses. Most people on the disability space will end up in the small business category. And those companies can't afford benefits. And people with disabilities can't afford to get off benefits and then get back on if they lose their jobs, because it takes another 20 years to apply for Social Security disability. Just no pun intended. So the idea is, I'm talking to economists and politicians, say, let them keep their benefits, and guess what? They're going to earn a check and start paying taxes, which they don't do now. Right. You will get some return on investment, but not everything, but you're not losing money either. So you've got to rethink the model for disability inclusion around the world. So those are the things that,
great, Jim.
Can allow us to do that.
You know, Jim, I, as some of my colleagues know at Kessler Foundation, that's a message that when I go to Washington, I try to share that message as well, that we need to flip things around. Because, you know, the 35% participation rate that we see right now with the 55 to 60 million Americans that we have, and perhaps about 30 million of them that are able to work between the ages of 18 and 64. You know, there's recent data. There you go. That's their biggest concern. That really is. So we really need to think about this and see what it is that we can do to make sure that they can go out, earn as much as they possibly can, pay taxes, be great citizens of the world. And that money goes right back into the economy anyways, you know, and when I think about it, I often think about a friend of ours from the foundation, Rich Donovan, who wrote the book Unleash Different. And if you haven't read Unleash Different, I would encourage you to, because he looks at it not from a charity. He looks at it not from an emotional or a compliance perspective. He looks at it from a business perspective. And he says if there's 1.3 billion individuals in the world that have a disability, and you multiply that times their family members and their friends and caretakers, you're looking at a multiple trillion-dollar business. In fact, that businesses should be looking at it as an emerging market, and not a disability component, but an emerging market. Next to women, the disability market is the next biggest majority group in the world. And so those are the things that I think can really change the dynamics when you have observable metrics that go to the CEO and say, look, Mr. and Mrs. CEO, if we're not looking at this as an emerging market, we're missing a huge opportunity. So I'm going to, I know we have just a minute left, and I'm going to end on Christina. Christina, you talked about the great work in Open Labs. Can you talk about the leaders in the industry that are really taking this forward in terms of leveraging the great work that you're doing in Open Style Labs and how they're getting it out to the marketplace?
Yeah, so actually my company Possible works with Tommy Hilfiger Adaptive, and Tommy Hilfiger Adaptive is one of the largest mass brands that has clothing at a fair price point for people with disabilities. And what they're doing is really looking at certain standards, like the button. The button was created for people who were dressing you. That's no longer the norm. So why can't we just use magnets? And it makes it easier for everyone. And I think really Open Style Lab and Tommy Hilfiger Adaptive are two of the leaders in accessible clothing.
Very good. Ladies and gentlemen, that wraps up our time so that we can stay on time. Again, I want to thank you so much for including us, and I'd like to thank the United Nations leadership for inviting us to be here today to share our message. And if there's anything that we can do to help, please reach out to us at Kessler Foundation, or Susan, or Christina, or Jim. Thank you so much. Thank you.
And thanks for the mic. Okay, I forget to turn this thing on. Thank you for. I think this is a great example, going back to my choir metaphor earlier, of the most powerful, proactive singers. Thank you guys so much for that amazing conversation, and the conversation will continue. I have now the honor of introducing Daryl Chill Mitchell, who I don't know, I might be dating myself, but I remember him first from 10 Things I Hate About You a few years ago. And I just think he is such an example of what representation done right is about. He's just continued to be himself before and after spinal cord injury. And you may have seen him on NCIS New Orleans. You may see him on a show I'm afraid to watch, Fear of the Walking Dead. And I'm going to give him the stage now, but I'm so honored to finally meet the great Daryl Chill Mitchell. I think I'm actually going to get off the stage. Sure. Yeah.
Are they ready? Turn the video on. Like, yeah. I thought there was, not my video, the other video. What's going on here? You got it? Oh, here we go. Now we're getting sexy. It's coming. That little present for you guys. It's a little something for those who don't know who I am. It's a little video introduction. And all right, I'm gonna start doing a little soft shoe in here in a minute. Oh, you want me to just start? Oh, okay. Well, what, you want to turn the light on so they can see me? There we go. I was playing a joke on you. How you doing? My name is Daryl Chill Mitchell. Eventually, we get the video started, and it'll pop on right while I'm talking. But in the meantime, we're going to speak right now. I came to the attention of the industry of entertainment and a rap group, formerly known as Groove Be Chill. First of all, before I get started, there's a few people in here I would like to thank. Especially, I have to thank the Kessler Foundation. And not only the Kessler Foundation, but I had the experience of being invited out to New Jersey when they was doing this like a walkathon type of thing out in a park. And it was like how I was able to date it is because one of my greatest helpers for that day made sure I had everything I needed, made sure it helped me get in place where I needed to get in place, made sure if I needed water, you want some water, you want this, you want that, was a 12-year-old kid by the name of Ryan Kessler. I was blown away when I seen him yesterday. I was like, dude, you was 12. I said, I'm 22. I was like 24. I was like, my goodness, 6'4" now. He was like maybe 6 inches. And Daphne, Rick is mad because he's jealous because his wife likes me. And I love her, and I thank your family more than anything. You know what you guys mean to me. And being able to go through the Kessler Foundation that day and go to the rehab center and actually laugh, and I still have the pictures, and work out with some of the people, and we were exercising together. And at that moment, it was like when I had just started to do one show, and then I was off of that show, and it was a little down period. and I was feeling some kind of way about myself. He gave me activity to come out, a place to call, a place where if I needed something or an idea to bounce off of someone, I could always call on him. Not only that, they also recommended a doctor for my brother-in-law to get neck surgery on. I mean, so you were very, very instrumental in my life. I have to thank my Wine Dance Day Committee who came out from my little town of Long Island where I grew up. Man, stand up and be recognized, people, please, because I need that. And also, Town of Babylon. Town of Babylon came out to represent me. And I have my manager of over 25 years here with me, Miss Jenny Delaney, who now, you know, after this course of time, you're not just a manager. You're like, she too young to be my mom, so she's like my sister. And my dear friend Jaren and my assistant helping me out today, Christian, and my bride sitting there with her iPad up, my number one source of support, Miss Carol Mitchell. I thank you and I love you. But I want to say that it's interesting in the career path that I chose as being an actor or entertainer. The first project that I did that brought me to national attention was a movie that cost $2 million called House Party, starring Kid and Play. And you're talking about grossed over like $200 million, which most of that money I didn't see. So I was popular, but I was broke. So, but the movie was great, introduction into the industry. But you know what I tell people too a lot of times? I say when you think about being, when you think about someone being, when you say drunk or high, you think of alcohol, you think of drugs. Intoxicated, that's the word I was looking for. A lot of times you can get intoxicated off of life. And when you take a 19-year-old, 20-year-old kid and you give him a lot of money and put it in his pocket, and all of a sudden now I'm flying private jets. I didn't say I was paying for them. Yeah, they say you don't have to pay for it, you just got to know somebody who can. And those opportunities, you start believing your own hype.
Guess here, Patton. We got to find those.
See? I know it's coming. It's going to pop up. They working it out. I'm going to keep my talk right through it. But the thing is, you start believing your hype a little bit, and you start, no is not an option. You don't want to understand the word no, and don't nobody want to tell you no. And it was a summer night, South Carolina, when I jumped on my nephew's motorcycle. He asked me to ride the night before, and interested enough, when he said ride it, I was like, nah, because I was drinking, so I wouldn't ride it because it's a bike I didn't know. So the next night he asked me to ride it. I was like, all right, fine, I'll ride it. But my mistake was riding a bike on a road that I wasn't familiar with. One side of the road was good, but the other side was washed out. And I was in a place called Beaufort, South Carolina, down there like south in Hilton Head, where my parents were from. And the salt water washes over the road, and it loosens the blacktop. So when you're riding a motorcycle at like 12 o'clock at night on a road you don't know, and it's dark and it's blacktop, you don't know. So as I took the curve, the bike wiped out, and I ended up in a ditch with the bike on top of me. So here we are. I am now in the hospital for 3 days, on a coma, on life support, and coded one time, so they had to shock me back. Now, let me tell you some things. When I died, I saw my grandma, I saw my grandfather, but I didn't see Elvis. So all y'all that visits Graceland, Elvis is still alive. Elvis is still alive. I didn't see Elvis. That joke get him every time. But no, it was. But one of the things that now here we are, 15 years in this industry as an able-bodied person. Now I come back 15 years as a disabled person. So now here I am working. Now I'm trying to get jobs. But one of the things that I've learned that respect will take you places money won't. And in my career, I had built up enough chips that people respect me enough to at least allow me the opportunity to come into the room. And I say that today because a lot of times in any field, which I heard up here today, a lot of times they won't let us in the room just because. And that's the thing where, you had to give me that. Even some of the people that I've worked for in the past, they were like, well, you know what? We're at least going to give them an opportunity to get in the room. It was interesting when I did a TV show called Ed. This was 4 months after I got out of the hospital, where a director from a TV show, the John Larroquette Show, had heard that Ed was interested in adding a new character to their show. They weren't looking for no person in a wheelchair or no particular. They were just interested in adding something different to the show. So John Weitzel, I figured the best thing for me to do is go out to Los Angeles and let people see that I'm still alive, that I'm still capable of doing this. I still have all my faculties and, where I'm not maimed. So at least, talk to somebody and let them know that I'm interested and I'm ready to come back to work. Well, they spoke to the producers over at Ed, and they were like, what are we going to say to him? Like he said, what are we going to say to the guy in the wheelchair? Hello? You want some water? So now I get into the office. We got a script that, I see some video popping up. Anyway, let me know when. Okay, so we have a script that they have in front of me to read. So they start talking to me, and I start explaining to them some of the funny things that they thumbs up. Okay, well, let's watch the video.
Need your best guess here, Patton. We gotta find those terrorists.
I'm on it. Every program has a back door, and Cracker Hack is about to kick it in. Judging from the radio signal and the range, I might be able to estimate the flight pattern to a 10-mile radius. Now, all the security cameras are running through a high-tech command center, just like in a casino.
That mean you can trace it?
If I can, we might hit the cyber hacker jackpot. Hey, I got a hit. Those are 2 fake agents. I'm running facial recognition, checking every database known to man.
But we still don't know what they're after.
Well, we will when Patton figures out who the hell we're dealing with.
No pressure there. We broke the encryption on the Russian's phone.
Yeah, we found a text chain.
No way to backtrace the source.
How would you know that unless you... Oh, man. Did you hack the CIA?
Don't ask if you don't want the answer. Don't fear. Triple P is here. I have access to the drone feed. I'll give you a bird's eye view. Get out of there. She's on her way.
Come on, Patton, start the van. Let's go, 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 go.
Now, the good thing about, I now have to remix my story, but we're going to get back to it. But with this show right here, they asked me to do 2 episodes just as to see. And I always tell my manager, once I get on the show, I'm going to get them pregnant with me. They're going to have to keep me. 2 shows turned to 12 episodes in 1 season. 12 turned to, here we are 5 years later on this one show. We just recently finished shooting the 100th episode of NCIS New Orleans. And they say about me, you add so much depth to this show. You make it so much real because this is a character that everybody can relate to. And the thing about it is the computer. You know, you saw so many different things in that. That van is a little mobile mini command center that they created for me. Now, you saw me work the computer, and you also seen Sebastian run up and say, Sebastian, start the van, let's go. Because not only am I working the computer, I'm driving the van. So all these little things are working on here, which I do every day. They know I drive because I have a Winnebago. So they implement all these different things into the show. So that was the great part about being on NCIS New Orleans and doing that. But getting back to Ed, which the story is going to be told down the line, is basically about how the producer, I went in the room with a script. We never opened the script. We were just talking. I just started telling them all the funny things I was going through, some of the funny things that happened, because sometimes you got to laugh. If you don't laugh, you're going to cry. So, and one of the favorite stories that they love to hear is one day I went up to the rental car place, and a kid saw me from house party. He was so excited to see me. He was like, oh, my God, this is Chill from house party. So I'm sitting there. I usually get in the car. I break my wheelchair down, put my wheels across me. I put my chair across my chest, and I put it in the passenger seat so I could drive off. So he seen me. He said, look, I got this, bro. I'm going to put it in the trunk for you. So I just looked at him. I said, now, if you put it in the trunk, how am I going to get it? He was like, oh, man, you going to talk about me, ain't you? I said, boy, you're going to be the #1 skit in my comedy, dude. So, and they were like, and, and it took them a minute. After you guys laughed because you got it. They was like, well, don't it go in the trunk? Oh, yeah, you may, yeah, okay. They looked at me like it made sense to them. But it's just a fact of not knowing. I didn't get out that door. They were on the phone calling my manager. We got to have him. We don't know where it's going to go, but we're going to give it a shot. They started putting ramps inside the studio in the bowling alley, because we used to run a bowling alley called Stuckyville. But bowling alleys have this little walk thing. You go down and go in the back to fix stuff. Well, it had stairs. So in order for me to go out the back to the trailer, I had to go out that way, or I had to go all the way around. So they built a ramp. So you know what happened? The camera crew started using the ramp. Because before that, they used to roll all the way around the building. But just something simple. So all the ramps that was put in place for me at the studio was being used by the camera crew. But that was the way they moving their cameras around. So they was like, man. So it helped them. So by helping me, it helped them. But it's little things like that and jobs like that. And now, I don't care what nobody say. I seen it. I didn't want to believe it, but I see it. That the needle in Hollywood is kind of moving. I've seen more people on television with a disability now since I've been on television. Now it's like becoming the style. You better have somebody on your network, because you're going to be left behind. And now, I'm proud to say it, that I am on 2 of the biggest television franchises in television right now, NCIS and Fear the Walking Dead. Now, thank you. The needle is moving, but we still got a long way to go. And that goes in everything that we do. And as long as I am here to be a voice and an advocate for this thing, being guided a lot by Mr. Kessler, of course, anytime I got something that if I think it's the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do, I'm going to call you to find out, because I know my mouth can be big at times, so I got to be careful of what I say. But you still got the video queued up, right? All right, so we're going to roll into the rest of the video so then I can finish telling my story.
incredible triumphs, devastating losses, unbelievable chance, and sudden misfortune. Then there was life after.
I never was a quitter. I was always a fighter. We were like, wow, we can do anything.
I didn't really know who I was.
Because I was in love. The Last Dragon changed
America
my life.
looks like
Sometimes
that girl.
who you are is not what you want everybody to see.
People was just like, yo, I want that kid from House Party. I never really thought about being a serious actor, like, you know, but then I got into it and cut that check. Like, whoa, y'all paying me this much to do this?
From the beginning of Daryl Chill Mitchell's career, he was always a standout.
He was actually one of the, I think, for a period there, one of the top supporting actors in sitcom. He was in good sitcoms, and he was part of why they were good.
So what they saw, they liked the attitude more than anything, and they were like, yo, I want this kid, I want this kid, I want this kid.
Television, the sitcoms at that particular time, needed, you know, a black dude, you know, funny dude, snappy, and he was that. We got an opportunity to work together on House Party, and it was awesome.
House Party was just a huge force for films mixing in with hip-hop, period. It was a breakout pioneer film.
When I first read the House Party script, the characters weren't kid and play. Reggie wrote it with Groove Be Chill in mind. The famous scene where him and Martin, you know, almost come to blows in front of the, you know, the DJ setup. It's just classic.
Yo, chill. Don't bump the table. I'm trying to mix. Yo, you call that mixing, man? I just helped you out. Thank you.
So there is where I got my start. That was 30 years ago in doing movies and television. And so now we skip forward to where we are today. And you know what? Since we done told a lot of the other story, keep it rolling so I can keep on going. Turn the video down so they can know.
About the accident in 2001, it's some things that you want to remember, some things you don't. It was just a normal day. I mean, the night before, my nephew was asking me to ride his bike. So I said, let me jump on this thing and feel how, you know, how I ride. And I seen a picture of me actually on the bike. It's a good-looking picture, too, boy. I was cute. So that's the only thing I remember was, I think I remember taking off.
I kept getting phone calls from my family down there. They was in South Carolina. They was saying, like, yo, your brother was in an accident. And it was like, yeah, he wasn't responding. And then my sister called me. It was like, it was real serious. Like, Daryl's on life support. Just to see him, like, not to be able to respond and not know if he was going to make it and flatline once. Everybody was shooken up, definitely.
I woke up in the hospital. I thought that I was home. First I woke up like, how we get home so fast? And I was like, you know, and then the doctor came and was like, Mr. Mitchell, I just want you to know, you know who you are? And I was like, yeah, now I do. And they were like, yo, you was in a motorcycle accident. And then I was like, motorcycle accident? And then I just, you know, I'm thinking, I don't remember getting on no bike. He was like, yeah, well, you damaged your spinal cord. The prognosis is you got a strong possibility you may never walk. It was an episode that, you know, we was in there talking about how I get dressed. And I was telling them, and they was like, yo, would you mind showing that on the camera? I was like, nah. This guy wrote me a letter, and he said, you know something? He said, I've been in a wheelchair for 20 years, and I've been getting dressed in my chair, fighting to pull my pants up, and watched you on one episode of this show lay in the bed, put your pants on, roll over in your stomach, pull it up in the back, and get out the bed. He said, dude, you learn something every day. And it amazed me, because I'm like, I'm in the chair maybe like a year almost, you know, and people are learning things from me. Being around the crew and the cast, it was like that show taught me that I can still do this.
I guess I didn't really I don't know that you would understand. Like, you know, that it takes hour upon hour just to face your day. And then we would film long hours, you know, 14, 15, 16-hour days. And to come in every day and just be like, you know, just blooming with light like that does make you think about, well, what am I complaining about?
Daryl's response to his accident, in many ways, gave another opportunity to show what he's made of. And the fact that he has not become depressed, not become resigned, not become defeated. He continues to work, that people recognize him and say, oh, I need to work with this guy. He brings quality and value to my projects. This is all a tribute to how good he is.
Okay? Now we should hit the road.
And if we say no?
Then I'll take your truck and we'll keep doing what I've been doing.
You gonna take the truck?
That's right.
Man, do you know how to handle 80,000 pounds of metal at 80 miles an hour?
I do. Not any harder than my van. I want to talk to the guy that set all this up. Listen, if you think that you can just come in here... Okay.
We going with you, bro.
Yeah, you're fine.
Oh, that's not good.
Step 2, now! Off the asphalt!
The boxes. Oh, my yeast cake was in there.
How many slugs you got?
2 birds and 1 deer.
It's not enough.
Where's the rest of the guns?
Oh. They're with your yeast cake, Jimbo. They'll finish it. That's what they do.
I said don't move.
Wendell!
Make that 1 bird.
We need to move.
Come on, man. I can't help it if you've always been jealous, so you find ways to mess things up for me.
Jealous?
Jealous of what? Growing up, I was a better athlete, I was smarter than you, plus I'm better looking. All my teeth are next to each other.
I tell people I never stop walking. I just stop physically taking steps. But you never stop walking. Don't ever give up. I refuse to lose. And second place is that ain't good enough. First to nothing. Winning means, to me, the journey. The destination, that's the end. It's how do I survive the journey? I'm gonna be who I am, because this chair does not define who I am. It just moves me around to get me where I need to be. Wow. Can you hear me? Oh, yeah. I was watching. I'm good. No. You know, I used to joke about it. I said a lot of times I like having people in here because they talk about me, and I love to hear how good I am from other people. But it's not that. I like seeing that because it make you realize that be careful of the decisions that you make, because you realize how many people, well, no, you don't realize how many people you affect in a good way or in a bad way. And when I hear this, I hear these people speaking, it makes me realize that, you know what, you affect people's lives. So now I'm here today, and I'm just hoping that the work that I do, it gives people motivation. A lot of times I get a lot of emails. I get a lot of people inboxing me on social media telling me about, you know, how they were moved to be able to believe that they can do something or they can achieve something. And all that does is fuel me even more because I recognize my responsibility that I didn't see before this. And now when I have the opportunity that the chips that I have stored up, I realize, you know what? I got to cash these chips in for other people. And that's the main thing. Now I realize that I hear a lot of times people go, well, I don't want to be a role model. And I don't want to be, but sometimes you don't have a choice. Sometimes you have to recognize your gift. And you have to work with it and give people hope for tomorrow. Because the only thing I always tell people now in Hollywood is, listen, if I'm on 2 television shows, I know there's a large number of performers with disabilities that I've worked alongside. We did a show, pilot, where basically we were in a rehab center. And I mean, you talk about singers, writers. The interesting, that show, you just saw a clip of me and Strahan. I was the writer. I was the actor, the star. I was the music supervisor on that show. And if it would have went another season, there was talk of me actually directing an episode. So even though we only had 13 episodes of that show, it was one of the most educational moments in my career because I got an opportunity to wear so many hats on this one sitcom. And I was being mentored by one of the greatest writer-producers in television, in Don Rio, who was one of co-creators of Golden Girls and one of the writers on MASH. So it was like, it was a dream come true. It was a school for me. And, you know, he was like, you want to do, you know anybody want to do the music? I said, oh, I used to do music. He was like, well, all right, it's yours. I couldn't believe it. So now here I am creating music for transition, hiring people to do these different things on these one show. So if I can do all of this, you know how many other people out there with abilities that can direct, that can write? That's just one of the writers on my show. She was disabled, but she was one of the greatest writers. So you give people an opportunity, and that's the main thing that we are looking for in any business, in any corporation, is opportunity. I don't want no handout. When I came to Hollywood, I never asked for a handout. I wasn't asking for one then. I'm not asking for one now. And not only that, here I am now on NCIS New Orleans. Now, my show was a gateway for my son. My son has been a PA on the show for 3 seasons. Now, the interesting thing about him is he was my assistant. I brought him on to assist me. But he speak geek. I'm not a geek. A lot of those guys on the set are geeks. So they like comic books and they like all these different movies. And they have a thing called, Geek Night when they shut down the studio and they come in and play these games and video games and they swap stories and they build Legos. I ain't into all of that. But my son is into all of that. And they took a liking to my son. And they was like, dude, you here every day. My son got to the point, if he see a cameraman trying to get cameras up the ramp, he'll just start pushing because he knew everything that needed to be done. And they was like, well, dude. And Sherman was like, man, give Lil Chilla walkie-talkie and give him the codes and all the things. Now my son is instructing everybody when they come in, the new PAs or where's things at, this how to do this and that. My son is on the spectrum of autism. He's autistic. But I have to tell them on the set because they don't believe it. They're like, he quiet, and then he need to speak up. I'm like, dude, he got autism. He got what? I'm like, he autistic. Nah, get out of here. I'm like, yeah. But it's a disability you can't see. And the way, he moves, they don't believe it. And so ever since the third season, now the interesting thing, when I first had to get him to work, I used to have to get an Uber. And my son ain't know no better, but he just wanted to belong. That's the only thing for him, is he just loved the fact that they love him, they respect him, and he got a job. One day, he took a Uber cab ride, $80, to work. And they was like, chill, what are you doing? He was like, man, I had to get to work. They said, but you can't spend $80, man. He said, ain't no problem, my father paid for it. From that day forward, I took my card off that Uber and put his on there. So he can learn. He had to see. No, dude, Dad ain't going to be just paying for that. But I got him back because one day, he got his own apartment in the building, and he got his light bill came in. He was like, Daddy, the light bills came in. Here goes mine. And, you want me to pay yours? I was like, yeah. There you go. He went and took care of that. But, I mean, just to see him in his own space, moving, and at that point now, it went from Uber rides to the only people that get driven to work are the actors if they choose to. I like to get picked up and dropped off. Directors get picked up and dropped off. Writers and guest stars that fly from out of state. They start to realize my son's value. My son doesn't drive. My son get picked up every day. He's the only one. Pick him up. Send a van for Little Chill. Hit the van, come get him in front. But I'm saying to myself, you know how many disabled people that would bring value to your job, that they possibly may not work, but drive, but you know what? They want to work. But they might not be able to get there. But it's more valuable to you to go get them and take them back. You got these vans that y'all just sit here idling, doing nothing, but you're paying for them. But there's so many, and the thing is, my son on lockup, you got to see him lock up Bourbon Street. And one of the funny things that happened one day, the executive producer, director, Mr. Jim Heyman, who is the top man on the show, he came to set one day. Well, it was a day he wasn't directing, but he was, making sure everything was running right. And on the stage, we have a red light that goes around that lets you know when we rolling, you can't come on the stage. And Jim came to stage, and Jim went to go in that door. And my son stopped Jim. Jim looked at him. My son looked Jim right in the face, told him, rolling mean rolling. Jim was like, you know what? He said he turned around to laugh because he didn't want him to see him laugh because that's something he's supposed to know that. And he said, you know what? I didn't go in that door because I got to lead by example. But my son, because, when they all the titles and all these big things, that means nothing to my son. He about the job. That's what they say, yo, chill. You know what? He one of the best we got. If you put him on a task, you better go get him because he's going to stay on that task. Nothing else matters. If you give him a job, that's what he want to do. But that's all people want is an opportunity. And he created that for himself. I just got him on the stage, but he created a job for himself. But I have a little bit of time, and I would like this to be a conversation more than a lecture. So I would like to ask people for some questions. 2? That's it? 3? All right. I want to see if the video would have been running. I see that y'all blew 2 of my minutes right there. All right. Oh, here we go.
So many actors talk about how they believe in themselves, and I find it rare that they actually share outside resources to get to that place of believing in themselves. So I wanted to know if you have any or have had any outside resources that enabled you to be empowered and believe in yourself, after your accident.
I had a very strong Hollywood support team. um, it was a boxing promoter by the late Butch Lewis, and he somehow wrangled up a lot of guys who loved the sport of boxing, and I happened to be one of them. And we used to go to the fights for many years before I had my accident. And the team was basically Butch Lewis, Denzel, Bob Johnson, who used to own BET, Judge Mathis, Leon, Wesley Snipes. And when I got hurt, whatever they were doing, it stopped. And everybody came to Georgia. And when I came home on rehab, they showed up. And it felt like the cavalry had arrived. Because you so afraid, you don't know if you're going to live or die. Then you sitting there, don't know if you're going to be able to support your family. So when they come to your aid and they're like, dude, whatever you need, you know we got you. You know, because this is not like people that I just associated with. I'm talking about I spent a lot of time with these people. And, you know, as soon as I got out the hospital and first Mike Tyson fight in Tennessee had happened, Denzel came from L.A., stopped in Atlanta, got me on a plane and got me to Mississippi to be at the fight. So there's like nobody's left behind. So that it gave me a comfort of saying, you know what, at the end of the day, I'm going to be all right. And then so happens that Spike Lee was doing a movie called Inside Man, and they had a role on there, and he made me come and audition for the role, and I got to be in the movie. So I always tease Denzel that I wasn't in the movie with you, you was in the movie with me. But that's my support team. Next question. Thank you.
Hi, Daryl. I'm
Yay.
Grace. We've talked a lot about employment and education.
Grace, right?
Yes.
I'm good. I'm good.
Today, and especially about your son doing his task, having a job. How important do you think it is for people to understand that inclusive education is really the future, especially for so many schools, so many fields in the arts and design, to be, I think, diverse, accessible? Could you speak a little bit about that?
It's very important. I just recently went to Michigan to participate in this project, well, to speak, because I do computers on the show. So they felt that it was important, as Rick was just telling me. He said computers, it levels the playing field. It makes it inclusive for everybody. And the thing was, this was a thing called C of S. It is basically called computer science. What happens is the interface in these schools does not allow these children the ability to be able to participate in the education of computer science. So they're trying to come up with a way to do that, and they have put together this lamp that I wish I would have brought with me that these kids made, and I think some of them helped design it by being able to talk to the computer, slide screens, touch screens, and these guys created an actual lamp out of pipe with a USB switch and a bulb for the head, and you can imagine these little pipes are arms and the little legs are crossed, and it's a working lamp. And these kids are, you know, like I said, one of the kids that helped design it he had no use of his arms. So that was the most incredible aspect of being there. So it is very important that we educate. But I want to say that we all here, this is the Army right here. You guys, I want you to go out, please, and campaign and push and let the world know that we can't, seeing everybody up here, and include myself, disabled, have to tell a story. Without you, there's no me. And we all one. I want us to get on one rhythm and make a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful song. God bless you. Thank you, and I appreciate your time.
really hard to come after Darrow. But I can tell you, I'm so inspired just listening to him. And his incredible passion, courage, strength is truly contagious. So thank you so much, Darrow, for joining us. And I really want to thank the panel, incredible panel, who was here. Roger said something about the wheel on suitcases, and truly the impact of wheel to humanity, I believe, is the same impact technology has to people with disability. I think it would change the lives of so many people to make it better, easier. I wanted to now introduce someone very special, my boss, Undersecretary General Jan Beagle, who is with us. Ms. Beagle is an incredible supporter of people with disabilities, and since she's been back at the UN, she was the executive director of UNAIDS, and prior to that, many key roles within the UN. She's implemented so many programs around accessibility, around making this building more accessible, and pushing for policies around accessibility. So please join me in welcoming Ms. Jan Beagle.
So good afternoon, everyone, and it's really a great pleasure to be here, and my department has just been delighted to be able to contribute to this particularly important day and to host this very candid conversation on comprehensive inclusion. And I'd really like, first of all, to thank all of the contributors who have helped us to reflect on the art of the possible, beginning with Ambassador Kelly Curry. Thank you so much for opening this very important afternoon. Thank you also to Ambassador Cherith Norman for being with us throughout. I'd like to thank our panelists, Roger, Christina, Susan, and Jim, and of course, our special guests, Sian and Chill. Quite amazing. Something I think that all of us are going to remember for quite a long time. You all know that the theme for this year's International Day of Persons with Disabilities is around empowerment and inclusiveness and equality. And those exact same themes are at the heart of our efforts to change and improve the organizational culture within the United Nations. And I wasn't able to be here the entire afternoon because I was at another meeting on sexual harassment with a lot of ambassadors and others here who are looking at this particular issue, which again is one which needs massive cultural change. And when we were reflecting on this issue today, a lot of what we were talking about there was about cultural stereotypes and how the way that you are viewed is through a certain prism. And that prism is often very different depending on your level of disability. And I think this is something that we really need to think more about, the linkages between different types of vulnerabilities. I think you all know that the Department of Management is undertaking a wide variety of initiatives to enable greater access and inclusion for people with disabilities. We're leveraging the technological developments that can help us to improve online recruitment accessibility, the physical improvements in our office structures, in our conference halls, in our facilities, and also we're looking to see what other ways can we find to bring down those barriers that stand in the way of full inclusion. So I'm committed, along with my team, to remove physical barriers wherever they will prevent staff members, delegates and visitors from full inclusion and equal access to these headquarters. And I can tell you that in this, those of you who have different types of disabilities are our partners. You have to tell us what you need. And when you tell us, I'm committed that we will do the maximum that we possibly can to address those needs. We'll also remove virtual barriers wherever they still prevent people from disabilities from accessing and from contributing to the organization. And I also believe that we have to do our best to remove those mental barriers, and maybe those are the hardest barriers to bring down. but together, I think we can do it. And together, with inspirational conversations like this one with Chill and others, that is what gives us the ideas and raises the awareness. And we have to bring this to a broader audience, and I really value all of your thoughts on how we can do that. And I think what he said about giving opportunity is really the key, and leaving no one behind. And for those of us in the UN world, that is the theme of our Agenda 2030, of our Sustainable Development Goals, is leaving no one behind. And that has to be clearly our objective, and is certainly our objective in Department of Management. So as we close today's event, I want to invite you to take a closer look at the art of the possible through the exhibits outside of the room. Please do browse through the exhibits from the Open Style Lab, the Kessler Foundation, User First, and our own United Nations Offices for Human Resources Management and Information and Communication Technology. And I would like here to thank our ASGs, Madalena Lopez and Ati Riazi, for all the work that they have done on this issue, including today. So thank you again for being with us on this very special day. My commitment is to retain our focus on this issue, to keep it high on the political agenda, and to continue with concrete activities to ensure inclusion and opportunity for everyone. Thank you very much.